kids, it is great to have you with us this morning. I always like it when it's a Kids Sunday and looks like you all got equipped with your gear to make it through. And there is the prize box at the end to make it all worth your while. But I thought it might be helpful for all of us to get our brains in gear this morning if we started off with a little quiz. And now some of you are going to see this and you're going to go, oh, I've taken this one before. And I'm just saying, don't be that person today when this is happening. Like, you don't have to blurt out any answer or anything like that. But so here's what you need to do is watch this little video, and what you're trying to do is count how many times the players wearing white pass the ball. Okay, take some concentration. So here we go. Okay. Who got 16? All right. Well, some of you can work on your counting skills a little bit. How many of you saw the gorilla? Okay. How many of you who saw the gorilla had seen this before? Okay. Let me ask you, did you see the person wearing black who left the stage? Did you see the curtain change colors? Oh, some of you are really on top of everything here this morning. But okay, let's rewind it here a little bit, and we'll go back and let you see that as you're focusing on the white. Yeah, so really, you get so concentrated on one thing you can't see it. They've done this experiment with other things too, like showing people this picture of this really cluttered bathroom and saying, find the toothbrush, and you immediately see it there on the front of the counter and miss the giant toothbrush back by the mirror that's taking up the whole picture. And they'll have people walk past a tree and they have money hanging from the tree and people don't notice it because they're not looking for it, right? Because we only see the things that we're really looking for. And I think that's sometimes true in Scripture as well. We can get so focused and looking for certain things that we miss out on other things that are there. And so this morning, I want to look at something that it's just a quick little mention. It's not the main point of the story, but I think there's something in it for us to stop and look at. So we're continuing in our study of the book of Acts. And as you may recall, I want to ask you what city we were. You guys have just taxed your brains for the morning. That was a lot. So last week we left off with Paul was in Athens. Yeah. Oh. You're sharp now. You're ready. But when he was in Athens, remember it was a city full of idols. Anybody remember the number we were throwing around of how many idols? 30,000. And it's just flooded with idol worship. And he's the very first Christian ever in that city. And you go, that could feel so overwhelming and daunting to be up against that. And yet we said that the ratio is irrelevant when you have the living God with you. And so Paul is there and he's preaching the gospel. And unlike so many towns that we've seen previously, he doesn't get run out of town. It's not like this big clash and battle. The people in Athens, they just kind of like, they just don't give him much reaction. A few people believe, not a lot. I think Paul would have probably preferred a bigger reaction just to go, oh, people actually understand what it is that I'm saying here. But anyway, he leaves Athens, and that's where we're going to pick up the story today. So it says, after this, Paul left Athens, and he went to Corinth. And there he met a Jew named Aquila, a native of Pontus, who had recently come from Italy with his wife Priscilla because Claudius had ordered all Jews to leave Rome. That's a lot of places we just mentioned there, so I just want to give some context for us real quick. If we look at this map, Pontus is up there. It's more of a region than a town. You'll see Tarsus below it. That's where Paul was from. And Priscilla and Aquila, they went to Rome until Emperor Claudius issued an edict kicking out the Jews from Rome. They didn't worship the emperor, and so they were considered to be troublemakers often. And so Priscilla and Aquila left Rome, went over to Corinth in Greece, and Paul was in Athens, and he hopped over to Corinth there, which was like less than 50 miles for him to go. So that's how they met. That's where we're at in the story there. So Paul went to see them, and because he was a tent maker, as they were, he stayed and worked with them. Every Sabbath, he reasoned in the synagogue, trying to persuade Jews and Greeks. So the little detail that I want to focus in with you on today is this little word that we're told that Paul was a tent maker. This is the only place that word is used in the whole Bible. It's the only place that we're told that this was Paul's profession. And, we're not given much detail about it. I wish it explained a little bit more about it. Tents have been around for forever, and some are a little better constructed than others. The region that Paul was from, and also Priscilla and Aquila, was known for its goats. And so the fabric from the goat hair may have been a big part of fabric tents that they were making there. But also Priscilla and Aquila were coming from Rome, and there's some speculation that they were more making like the leather kind of tents that the Roman soldiers would use. This is a recreation there of the kind that the Roman legions would stay in. The only current ongoing practice of tent making from ancient traditions that's carried out today, really that we know of, is from Egypt. And you can see on those front flaps that are lifted up, the inside of the tents was so ornate and just these intricate designs and patterns. And you could go to Cairo today. There's a market in Cairo where there is actually, it's called the Street of Tent Makers. And it's these craftsmen, I think they all men, but who are continuing this ancient tradition of this skill, which is kind of cool to see. But we don't really know which of those was the skill set that Paul was working with. We do know, though, that it wasn't just like day labor that, he could just go and get hired to do it. This is something that took some skill and some professionalism. And if he was recognized by other people in the industry as having a good employable skill set, that he knew what he was doing, and he had invested a lot of time learning how to do it. And it's kind of interesting, to think about Paul doing that, because I think most of the time when we think about him, we just go, well, he was like a professional apostle, right? Like that's just what he was always about, always talking about God all the time. And yet, even the way Luke writes the account says that he was going to the synagogue on the Sabbath. And so the rest of the time, he's working on making tents. And you could look at that and go, well, that's too bad that he had to do that, right? That he couldn't just go full time with what he was all about. Or at least he could have done something that would use his brain, not just be manual labor kind of work. But the reality is that Paul really valued his day job. He loved it that he could do that. And in fact, he would write to the Corinthians and was saying he he was so glad about that because he said, what then is my reward? Just this, that in presenting the gospel, I may offer it free of charge. And in so doing, not make full use of my rights as a preacher of the gospel. He was like, I don't have any problem with people doing that, but I personally don't want to burden people. And this to me is a joy to be able to do this other work. It was part of his identity, how he saw himself and what he wanted to do. So he didn't want to be free from that. It became really a major point of connection between him and Priscilla and Aquila. They really bonded. They spent a lot of time together doing their work, and I'm sure they were also talking about the Lord as they were doing that, but they became really close and had a lifelong friendship after that because of it. So I think, Paul's mindset really then was that you didn't have to be a professional Christian. I really like what Gene Veith said. He said, the priesthood of all believers, which is what we're all called in the Bible, we're a kingdom of priests. It didn't make everyone into church workers. Rather, it turned every kind of work into a sacred calling. Isn't that good? Whatever your work is, it's a sacred calling because of what Christ has done for us. And so Paul would go on to tell other believers, he would say, work willingly at whatever you do, as though you were working for the Lord rather than for people. And we talked about that back in October. We talked about how whatever kind of job you're in, every Christian is a minister. That's kind of a core value for New Day. But I want to expand on the concept of work and not just think about it in terms of employment or career, but really to go, I think it's bigger than that for us as people. That work really, I think we can, for our purposes, have the definition be that it's the necessary task in front of us that demands our time, energy, and attention. So that kind of changes the way we think about work, because that could be a lot of different things, right? Sometimes we have work that we dread that's right in front of us, that's just kind of part of life. Sometimes I can sit in my office and look at what I need to do around the office, and I can get paralyzed and stuck at the organizational pieces of things that just need to happen. Scott actually wrote a song called 10 Feet, and it talks about this concept of 10 feet can feel like a million miles when all you need to do is get up and go across a room to deal with something relationally or deal with something that's a task that's just hanging over your head or whatever. We can all have that work, can't we? That just feels like too much, and we just might seem like a really little thing, but it's a really big thing. Does that resonate? That work can come in a lot of different forms, but we kind of have in our head what work for us should be like, what we would want in work that we would consider to be good work. So I want to hear from you your brainstorm ideas of, like, if it was ideal kind of work, what would it be characterized by? What would make it good work?
Be energizing.
Energizing. Purposeful. Yep. Joyful.
Don't have to think about it when I'm not doing it.
Yeah, you can detach from it. Right. Interesting. Yes. Productive. Yes.
Always feel good at it.
Yes. You want to feel competent, like you can actually do the job. So, we hit on several of these. We want it to be purposeful and meaningful, to have impact on the world. We want it to be acknowledged. We want to be recognized when we do a good job, and whether that's through pay or just somebody telling you, "Hey, I see that." We want it to be lasting. You don't you want to do something that is permanent and gonna be around for a while. And you want it to be fulfilling. You want that joy and that energy and that satisfaction of a job well done. And yeah, you want it to be interesting work. You want it to engage your mind. But sometimes that's not what work is, right? Sometimes work is unimportant. It's just busy work that has to get done. And it's not going to change the world. It's just bureaucracy and red tape and stuff. What? Laundry. Yes. That gets to the idea of permanence, because there's always going to be laundry to do again, right? It doesn't stay clean. It gets overlooked. People don't know how hard you work, do they? I mean, they don't have any idea how hard you're working. It's fleeting. It's short. I hate doing taxes, and I'm going to have to do them again next year, right? It's not like once and done. It's always having, and laundry is fleeting. It's frustrating sometimes. You can be trying to do something, and it's a very simple thing, and then something else comes along and makes it difficult. Or it's just boring. It's just like, laundry, back to laundry again. Just those tasks that you go, it just drains all your energy. It doesn't energize you at all. And work is kind of both of these things, right? It has both aspects to it. And there is this tension in it. Studs Terkel, who literally wrote the book on working, he said this, which I thought was pretty phenomenal. He said, work is about a search for daily meaning as well as daily bread, for recognition as well as cash, for astonishment rather than torpor, meaning that mind-numbing lethargy that can set in. And he says, in short, it's a search for a sort of life rather than a Monday through Friday sort of dying. And I can tell from your response to that you know what he's talking about, right? That sort of dying that can feel like it's going on during work. I remember right after our oldest, Isaac, was born, going back to work for the first time and having to sit in client meetings, and I just didn't care. I didn't care at all about what we were talking about, and it just felt like my soul was being sucked out of me. And it just felt like a death to be in that work. And I think the reason for that is that work is a blessing that's been hit by the curse. This is the tension within work that we find. Sometimes we think work is the curse, that it's a result of the fall, but it's really not. If you look in the book of Genesis, you find that it says the Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and to take care of it. So work came before there was any sin in the world. And what a privilege to think about God making this beautiful creation. This is God's art. This is his work, his project that he has invested himself in, and he enables us to participate in the care of it. He invites us into his own work. What a beautiful, amazing, generous gesture on his part to trust us with that. And yet, that's not all work is, because as soon as Adam and Eve ate the fruit, it changed things. And God told Adam, he says, cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. So work took on this really painful, difficult, ongoing aspect. It was going to be this way for all of life. That's the reality of work, that it's a blessing that's been hit by the curse. And so I believe that to do your work is to grapple with really essentially what it means to be human. It's the thing of being created one way dealing with the burden of sin on the other. That's the fullness of humanity right there, right? We are dealing with both things. Any thoughts on that bit so far before I move on?
Will you say your definition of work one more time?
Yeah, I believe that work is the necessary task in front of us that requires our time and our energy and our attention. So that's I just made that definition up. It's not like an official definition anywhere. But it's broader, right? And we all have that work that kind of has both sides to it. And Paul even, Paul knew he's making tents, which are the flimsiest sort of structure, right? Those are not lasting buildings. And he knew that. And the only reference he ever makes to imagery from his craft speaks to this, because he said, for while we are in this tent, speaking to our bodies, he says, we groan and are burdened because we do not wish to be unclothed, but to be clothed instead with our heavenly dwelling, our permanent place, so that what is mortal, what is that Monday through Friday dying, may be swallowed up by life. So our work, while it is important, it also, the end product isn't the thing. And Paul knew that the end product, the tent, was not the thing. The great news is that Jesus entered into this being human alongside of us. He fully entered into the dilemma of work. And we know that he was aware of his work from a very early age, because think back to when he was 12 and his parents took him to Jerusalem and they lost track of him. They couldn't find him and they're scrambling around in a panic. And then they find him in the temple. And Jesus says to his mom, he says, "Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business? Didn't you know that this is what I've been given to do? This is what I'm about." And there's a quote from Claude Alexander in his book, Necessary Christianity, where he says this. He keys in on that conversation of Jesus. And he says, Jesus raises the issue of the aboutness of his life. His being is about something. To say I must be about is to say I must keep the intentionality of my life in focus. We must be here because there is something our being here is about. There's something our being here is about. And if you know what you're about, then that can transform what you're doing. And you go, it's not getting that end product that you're working on. That's not the thing. So you can be doing any kind of task, and you don't have to love the task to love God through the task, right? It doesn't have to be your favorite kind of project that you're working on. It can still be changed when you know what it is you're about. Any thoughts on that? So Jesus knew what he was about, and you think about after the incident at the temple, there's a period of his life that's really silent for us. It's hidden for us. We do not know about Jesus' early adulthood at all. 10 plus years of all his 20s are gone to us. We don't even know. They're gone to many of us. but Christ's 20s, we don't know much about. But when he got to that point in his life that we are familiar with, the time of his healing and teaching ministry, And the first time that he showed up in the synagogue in his hometown, the people there were familiar with the life that he had just lived through his 20s. And so somebody there remarked to somebody else, isn't this the carpenter? Like, where did he learn this stuff? How does he know all this? Because they knew him in the context of his work that he had been doing. Presumably, I think it's safe to say for the last 10 plus years, Jesus had been doing carpentry. Now, as I said, we don't know much about that carpentry. We don't have any written record of the kinds of projects Jesus was working on. We don't have any tables or artifacts or houses or anything that he supposedly built. And yet we do know that all of Jesus' life, he was always doing the will of his Father. So in that 10 plus years of this other professional life that he had, he was doing his Father's will. But God's will for him there, that he was doing so perfectly, must not have been about the end result of that work, because we don't still have that end result. There must have been something else going on of what God was doing in and through Christ during that period of time, right? So there was value in it, because Christ didn't do anything that didn't have value, but it wasn't what you would normally think to look for in a job. And I think that Christ was developing a pattern, a lifelong pattern of offering himself and what he was doing to his Father, no matter what that was. And he was offering up his job, saying, your will be done, right? Offering it to God and saying, I don't know what you well, Jesus probably did know, but the idea of leaving the results of that hard work that he was doing in God's hands and trusting that his Father would do what he wanted to accomplish with it. Does that make sense? And I think this then ultimately prepared Christ for going to the Garden of Gethsemane and offering the fullness of himself there to God and saying, I'm submitting to your will be done. As he went to his most necessary work, which was on the cross. When we talk about what Jesus did, that's the work that we refer to the most, is his work on the cross. But you think about what his work was there. We know what it did, but we think about the work itself and what he was doing. What he was doing was, in human terms, getting to the least productive state you can possibly be in as a worker if you are dead. Jesus was doing something here that was doing nothing at the same time. He was incapacitated fully. He was held in place. He was restricted. He was diminished. He was undervalued. He was overlooked. He was despised and rejected among us. And in so doing, as he enters into this most important work that you look at it's the most unproductive anybody could be. And in so doing, he takes up all of the Monday through Friday dying of all of us. He takes on the human condition of our working so hard and being so frustrated by all the thorns and thistles of sin that wrap themselves around us and choke us out. And Christ takes all of that up on himself and takes it to the grave and then rises again and offers us an opportunity to enter into something new. So as we go about our own work today, it is different. It has the capacity to be different because of Christ, because not only did Christ take that all on himself, but he continues to offer himself to his Father. He's continuing to intercede for us. And so as we have the Spirit of Christ in us, and we're going about our work, sometimes we don't go about our work offering ourselves to God, right? Sometimes we are detached. Sometimes we can barely do it. And the whole time, Christ is offering himself through us. And even unbeknownst to us, that is happening. That is a reality that Christ did because of the cross. It's there. It's permanent. It is always ongoing. And so we can then enter into that ourselves. We can then choose to go, what am I choosing to be about? What am I going to make this work really be? Am I going to make it be about the dread of my not being able to do what I know needs doing? Am I going to just live in that fear of it? Am I going to be caught in resentment for nobody noticing how hard I'm working? Am I going to be all wrapped up in the impact that my work is going to have and the legacy that I'm going to leave? Or can I choose to offer it up? Can I choose to transform it into an act of worship, just bringing it to God and saying, God, I don't know what this is, but I trust that you do, and I will leave it with you, and I'm going to give you my all in it and offer it to him. I want to take a moment to just let you sit with this question. We're going to come to the Lord's table here in a moment. But let's take a moment and just quietly think about this question, of the work. First, what is the work that you know is in front of you right now? Maybe it's pertaining to your job. Maybe it's something else entirely more personal. But what is the work? And what are you choosing in your work right now? And if you've been choosing something other than offering yourself to God in it, can you bring that to him? Just confess that to him right now. Say, God, I'm sorry. Hand over your concerns to him. Hand him your resentment, your discontent, or your fear. Lord Jesus, I thank you for your work. I thank you for your work that not only redeemed us from sin ourselves, but also transforms the work that we do today. And sometimes that's hard to believe, that what we're doing has value. Sometimes it's hard to see purpose through the thorns. And so, God, we hand that over to you, and we trust you, and we want to trust you more. And thank you for this opportunity to come to the table once again, and remember that not only did you do the work, but you said specifically that it's for us. And we claim that today. Amen.